Okay. And I did that all on the opening screen to Planet side without actually playing the game. I'm still in preachy mode. And I was whacking off for like I don't know how long. I can go and I know people are not going to understand this, but people listening probably are the ones are know exactly what I'm talking about. You can sit there and whack the porn and just completely go off into la la land, and you wake up the next, like maybe 3 hours later, and your hand is still on your privates, and it's still greasy and it's disgusting, but you're just like, wow, I got some good sleep there. It's for me, it's kind of a requirement for me to get sleep that I be whacking off before you know, because it relaxes me. Okay, so I don't see the perversity that other people see. What I see is something that is become necessary for me to get sleep. And there's probably people that have to take drugs in order to sleep. They have to take the drugs, or they have to take really bad, hard drugs to sleep. You know, because their brain is not going to give them the dopamine. The brain has become so um, dependent on that method or process to give them dopamine that they can't get satisfaction. They can't sleep until they've had that fix. I'm just glad that the stuff that I've experienced or the stuff that I'm dependent on hasn't really destroyed me, hasn't destroyed my body. My body's perfectly healthy. All my blood tests come back perfect. Um, the last time I got my blood drawn, the doctor had zero things to say they were bad about what was going on in my body. It's like I'm living the life of an alpha male. An alpha male um, doesn't have concern or regret or depression. I mean, they don't get stressed. I have zero stress in my life, and as a result of having zero stress and understanding what stress does, is part of the reason why I don't have any stress. Why you have to disown it, and reason why you have to disown social stress, and that is you have to come to terms with that you are going to do what you're going to do whether people like it or not. um, that you can disown it for yourself is important, because if you don't, then you're going to be stressed at what people perceive is going on with you, and there are people that thrive on making you look like you're evil. There are bad people that thrive on being able to manipulate you by using social stress on you. And the best thing you can do is you can disown it. You can disown it for yourself. You don't have to justify it for them. You don't have to justify it before them. You just have to tell them that will not have the capacity to make me into the monster you want me to be, because I understand this about social stress, that unless people come out of the woodwork to beat me up, there is no reason for me to beat myself up over what you think. So I will let you think all this crap, but I know that what you're trying to do is you're trying to make me feel bad, and it's not happening because I know Satan's behind it. And they'll say, well, there is no Satan. I said, damn right there's a Satan, and you are offering Satan's coming through you to me, and I'm not going to fall for that shit. You see, it's resistant. It's what I call resistance training. You know, some people know what resistance training is. It usually means you're working with rubber bands, big old strong rubber bands, instead of working with weights. And resistance training is nice in that you can't like really hurt yourself with resistance training, because the only way you could is if you just try to do too hard a thing, but you're not going to get crushed from the weight falling on top of you, because you don't. I mean, when you're pulling stuff up, when you're picking up a heavy weight and pushing it against you, you have rubber bands that are attached to your bench and you're pushing away that. You're not pushing away a heavy bit of weights. And when it comes towards you, it becomes lighter and you're able to take it off. So you don't need someone to spot you. And you can still get the same strength from that. I understand what resistance training is. The resistance training I'm talking about is the resistance of resisting the one who defines bad stuff and resisting how people perceive you. By resisting that stuff and being able to be true to yourself and just say, I understand what's going on here. I'm not crazy. These people, they say that I'm crazy. I know that they're what they're trying to do. And I can get out of that because I know what's going on and I know why I'm not crazy and all this stuff. And even if I can't explain it, I was just saying to myself, I know what I'm with respect to my environment that they don't understand. I'm perfectly sane. They see me as crazy, but it's only because they can't see all the other shit that I'm not going to talk about, you know. But they're grasping for it. They're looking. They're kind of like they're on a cliff face, and their success is their ability to go up that side of that cliff wall, and they're just grasping for little things that they can probably leverage themselves to get up that face wall of overcoming you, and everything they grasp for turns out to just be a pebble that falls away, and then they're like, oh crap, you know. And so they're finding that they're going to have to figure out some way to get down because it's not working, and or get out of it. And they'll leave. They'll actually leave. They'll say, I can't deal with this. Where I was going with this is not working. These guys are obviously much stronger than I. I'm out of here because they don't want to deal with the social stress. See, they were trying to use social stress to control you, but whenever you disowned that, then they fell under the stress of trying to prove that there was something wrong with you. Because then the rest of the world started to see there's something wrong with them. And they're trying to get out of the situation because they don't want to keep failing at trying to make you fail. So that's what you do in games like this: is you don't let the trolls control you. You you do not permit them the capacity to make you do anything less than what you do. Even whenever you're just annoying the fuck out of everybody, just annoy the fuck out of everybody. Let it happen. Don't let those people in that game who don't know you and you don't know them and they're not being accountable to themselves. If you become more accountable and they haven't, then they're at fault. And so you say, I let you know who I am, and and this is what I do, and this is me, and no matter what you think, you are basically an unaccountable person. You're much weaker than I. And you can shit on their face and piss on their face and say, take it, because you are nothing as far as I'm concerned. Because you will not be as accountable as I will to what I've done. See? And if you become accountable to it, blackmail is impossible because the whole world knows that you do all the shit, you know. And there's nothing they can do. They have nothing to leverage, and they just leave because they know that it's not that no matter what they do, nothing's going to have any effect. And there are going to be other people who are going to get strength from your capability to prove that you could outdo them because their whole concern is what these bad people do to them. But if you can go around and kick their ass all over the place, those bad people can't get anywhere with it. And you point out what's wrong with the bad people, you can say, these people are shallow. They will not give up of themselves. They will not reveal themselves to other people. They will be critical of other people, but they'll do it by negating everything that they do in reality. You don't know anything about them, and all they're doing is they're just using the assumptions and the stereotypes and the things that people expect in society to pressure other people and manipulate them And they get a lot of glee by doing this without revealing anything about themselves. So all you have to do is you just have to say your saving face. You'll never self-deprecate. You'll never reveal that you fap yourself, and everybody knows everybody faps. So if I say I fap and you don't say you fap, then you're obviously something like a psychopath or a sociopath. You know, that we can't discuss the kind of stuff we like to fap to. See what I'm saying? There's nothing perverse in fapping. The perversity is a cultural perception. And its cultural perception is actually that our culture is much more perverse than the acts that we think are perverse. And we've adapted ourselves to that culture, and we haven't questioned it. We're not questioning the culture. We're not questioning why people see pot smoking as more perverse than alcoholism, and the alcoholism is much more destructive to people than pot smoking. What is perverse? It's a cultural perception that it's perverse because in the past it has been built up that it's perverse. And so the thing is that what's perverse is the people that have built up this perception in the culture that pot smoking is perverse. Okay. So you'll hear a lot of people that'll say, "Kids, don't do drugs." They'll do that around me, and I'll say, "What the fuck are you thinking? I did drugs? I've never smoked pot. Even if I'm supportive of pot, it doesn't mean that I've done it. I've never smoked pot. And I'll tell you, I mean, you can ask anyone that I was around whenever they were smoking pot. If I smoked pot with them, they'll tell you no, I didn't smoke pot with them because I didn't really need it. I was fapping to porn. That was where I got my joy from. Okay, so to need a drug for me, fapping to porn kind of made me immune to taking drugs. Is that with that I was getting into dopamine release, and I was saying, man, wouldn't it be awful to be dependent upon drugs? Because to go buy some drugs from somebody and then have to inject it or smoke it in order to get the same kind of joy I get from fapping to porn, which is the way I've thought all my life. See what I'm saying? And so then you start to realize that all these people that are doing drugs, what they're really doing is they're trying to avoid social stress and all the stressors that come from the culture. And I don't feel that because I've never felt subject to the culture. I've felt that the culture was perverse. And so fapping in a culture that's perverse, that sees fapping as bad, is going to drive people to do really hard drugs that the culture is seen as also perverse. And it's because they will not give people the benefit of the drug that sits between their legs because, you know, it's too easy, you know. And damn right it's too easy, but you never think to yourself or cognate why God would make it so accessible. And that's the reason why he made it so accessible, is because you are permitted to do it. You should be able to fap. People who don't want to fap are people who either have found some sort of perversity in something that was natural, or they've taken something Jesus said about lusting after women and don't understand that you can lust after cars and be still adulterous. It'd still be a bad thing. That the culture is constructed of fears that people have that are based on zero evidence of a reason why they should fear those things. Our culture produces figments of fear, and they're fearful of stuff, and that fear controls them, and through that Satan is able to control them, able to make them do stuff that Satan wouldn't be able to do unless there was such a culture. And as a Christian, what you're supposed to be doing is looking at the culture, determining what's perverse and what's not, and name it. Identify and name it and say, there's no reason for this. There's no reason to tell gay people they're going to hell. You shouldn't do it. There's no reason to say that drugs are bad for you. You shouldn't do it. Their drugs exist because God put them on the earth. They exist. They're there for times in the past. There were people that needed drugs in order to overcome situations of real stress, and now you're creating a stressor on top of that. That's a that's a social stressor, a social perception, a civilized perception, uh, that we're civilized as long as we don't do drugs. Whenever your forefathers and you know people before you were doing drugs to get to where you are now, you're disowning that, and you're not even possibly even knowing that happened in the past. You probably don't even know that you had a grandmother that was 13 when she started having children, and she was married to a 40-year-old guy. You know, you probably don't even know that. You know, it's possible the case that you are, and you don't even know it, and it's because that's what culture does, is it makes you think that you're okay whenever it's not only that the whole culture is wrong, and the fallacies that are in the culture are making everybody look okay whenever nothing's okay. Okay, and that's the reason why you need to be kind of involved with the Bible, is to be able to decipher what's in the culture that's wrong and take it out. You know. So, anyhow, and that somebody like me who can fap to porn start talking about stuff like that, you have to question it among yourselves. You can't come up to me and say, well, you're a wrong dude. And it may be that the reason why I have all of this is so that people like people other people that would listen to me will find truth in it, and will be able to pursue truth whenever you're sitting there thinking that you've got a leg up on everybody by being aligned with culture that has fallacies in it. Okay, and they're able to get away from that, and you're trying to keep them constrained, and you're trying to keep them subject to a culture that's flawed. Okay, that's the problem we liberals have a problem with the conservatives, is conservatives have become subject to a culture that's flawed, and are blaming the liberals for not being able to align with a culture that's flawed. And the liberals can see it for what it is, and the conservatives can't see a damn thing because they're complacent. They're not real conservatives. Real conservatives will be able to look in the past, see all of the changes that occurred, that were created through the legal systems and stuff, to come to the place where they are now. And they should be able to see all the perversity that exists and is still existent in the law, that needs to be shown up for what it is, such that example that in incorporation, that there were lawyers back in the 1800s that used 13th, 14th Amendments to support the idea that a corporation is an individual and should be treated as an individual. But that individual does not have the responsibilities of a person. They don't have empathy. And so they'll treat everybody like they're dirt, because all that matters to the corporation is the return on investment, what they make, the money they make. So they will exploit their workers, they'll exploit employees, they'll exploit any kind of externalities, positive externalities they get from the communities. They'll exploit those positive externalities and give them back negative externalities, and then profit on that, create a big old profit margin, and surface it, and give the praise and the tribute and everything to their creditors, who do not give a shit what happens to that, what that corporation's doing to make that money, just that they're giving a return on investment. And that's very perverse, and I think that all the things that we're experiencing in the market, the bubbles and all this stuff, were just God saying, I am going to let your indifference to how your money's being used. I'm going to let your indifference um, uh, fuck you. I'm gonna let it fuck you. I'm not going to help you. I'm going to show you your perception of the world is fucked up, and I'm going to let it fuck you and everybody around you, and you're going to come to the realization that the way you deal with making money is fucked up. And I use a word like fuck, which is really just an acronym that comes from the set of words for unlawful carnal knowledge, which was used to mean an adulterous relationship that two people had. They used it so much in the legal system that they watered it down to a word, and it's called fuck. And it just means an adulterous thing, okay? And so anytime there's adulterous things happening in our culture, it's perfectly okay for us to use the word fuck. It doesn't sound good. It sounds awful. It makes us feel awful, but there's a reason for that, and that's because the underlying idea is perverse. That somebody would do something adulterous, that somebody would ruin other people's marital relationships just for their own wants and desires and needs to have it for themselves, which is exactly what David did. I forgot who it was that he did it to, because I don't read the Bible that much. I know the stories, I just don't know the names that well. You could call up the name of the person, but what he did is he lusted after a friend's wife and he had sex with her, and their offspring God put to death because God feels for that child. That would be the bastard of that relationship. Feels enough that God wouldn't want that bastard to go through life with the feeling that he was the result of the sin of King David having an extramarital relationship. But what happened was is that King David ended up continuing to have children with this girl, and his second offspring was Solomon, and Solomon was had 1,000 concubines, and he was the guy who wrote Proverbs. And Proverbs is all just kind of like all the things you can do in the world that feel good hedonistically and all that stuff, and come to the realization that it's all for nothing. It's not going to go anywhere. It's chasing after wind. Everything is chasing after wind. But there are things that he says in Proverbs that were really kind of uh, insightful. Like my favorite one is, um, "Let bread upon the water, for it will be there for days." And that is, why don't you just feed the ducks and get the joy, give them the joy of being able to be satisfied by the bread, and you'll get satisfied by giving it to them. You throw it on the water, the ducks eat it, they get the satisfaction because you know you're not going to eat it in enough time before it starts to mold. So there are a lot of good things to see in Proverbs, and there was a good reason for Proverbs to occur. There was a good reason for Solomon to occur, is to point out that there's an extreme to which you can go, and you can have all the relationships and things in the world, and that could steal you from God. And I recognized that I could be like Solomon, and I could let sex be more important to me than all the stuff. And I see that what's really important is that I don't lose sight of God. I don't lose sight. I'm taking in information, and maybe this stuff this perversity that I got on the side that I've been doing forever. I've been doing since I was 14 years old. Maybe I could water it down to something simple that I'm just looking at women in bikinis is enough. I've found that just looking at their faces is enough for me. Um, that I can fap to that would be enough to get me through, and it wouldn't be much of a burden. Um, but the thing is it's really not important what people perceive of me. What's important is what I am trying to do and what I'm trying to bring to the world. Because I can bring stuff to the world, and it's obvious by what I've been saying and all the cognitive ability. I am a conundrum to the people who would have every need to make me look like somebody who couldn't possibly provide value, and that is a person who will openly display and put before everyone that they transgress, that they will sin. You know, they will do it before men. Tell them that they do a very perverse, that they look at pornography, or at least what the culture considers to be perverse. And the thing about pornography, to understand that's different from what was going on in Jesus' time, is that back then they didn't have pornography. So people don't even let that enter in. What they're doing is they're extrapolating an idea to something which is not carrying the same weight. If you're looking at a woman in lust, you're looking at them voyeuristically through windows and through and you're sitting there fapping behind a fence looking at them, and they know you're out there. That is very fucking perverse. I'm not doing that shit. What I'm doing is I'm looking at a photo of somebody who consented to have themselves become naked, and in that they were perfectly okay, and it's perfectly okay for me to look at them in what they did. And what I'm really doing there is I'm satisfying a need that I can't satisfy, because there's no woman on earth that would want to be with an ugly fuck like me. See, that's the way. And for me, it's okay that that's the case. I will give such people the money to support themselves to get through their life, because I could see that this was just a hurdle in their life to get to have the life that they wanted to have. You've probably heard of this song about a girl. I don't remember the name of it. It was from the 50s, where this girl who goes out and strips every night to be seen naked by men. She makes a lot of money, and she's only doing it to buy a farm so that she can have a life on the farm with animals and all the cute, lambs and stuff that she wants in her life. And all of this stuff is just a vehicle by which she gets. It's just a tool by which she gets to that existence that she wants. And in that, she's going to provide actual value that the world will never see, and only God sees it. And there's a reason why God's there the whole time that she's going through that. She just needs not to lose sight of that. She needs not to get involved with drugs, because drugs are going to destroy you. There are some people that are doing it because they're doing drugs. They'll take some hard drug they're dependent upon, and they're paying for the drug with their body and the perversity of the pornography. There are people who will do pornography to support other people. They might have there's a girl, she's a porn star, and I had wondered, and I really would like to talk to her about this, but there were people that would interrogate her about what her husband did. And she says, me and my husband, we don't have sex. And so you're married to somebody and you guys don't have sex, and you're over here doing porn? He says, yes. And she's pretty much straight. And I was able to kind of read through it. And she might hear this and she might break down and cry. And it makes me break down and cry, because I think this is what's happening. Her husband got either an STD or was sick altogether, had some problem, had cancer or something, and she felt the need to fix this problem, but didn't have the money to do it, and nobody would provide her the money, and she went into pornography to pay for the treatments for her husband. It was probably an STD, or that she had an STD and she was not willing to give it to her husband, but she wanted to support him. I'm very sure that this stuff exists, and I feel really connected to her. I don't know her situation. I don't even know if what I'm saying is true, but I feel really connected to her. I was always very attracted to her, but I was also attracted to her on an intellectual level. She was Wiccan. That didn't bother me at all. Wiccan to me is just somebody who's humanist, and they just need something to satisfy, and they're not willing to accept Christianity in there because they feel threatened, by Christianity, and they really shouldn't. The problem is, and that's what leads some people to go into Scientology is that they don't want to be subject to the pressures, to the social pressures that have come through Christianity, that even Jesus wouldn't even burden himself with. You know, things that, not things that he said, but things that people um, took took to heart that they shouldn't have taken to heart. You know, like just as I said, that it's adulterous to look at a woman in lust. The thing there is that you're not pursuing the woman. That's the important thing. Is that if you're looking at her in lust, that you're not pursuing her. It's the pursuing that makes it very difficult, because you could ruin her family, you could ruin her, you could ruin her perception of herself. You could do all sorts of stuff just by being visually present. But with pornography, that you're not visually. The only she's already bore the cost of that. She bought it herself. She put her naked body in those pages. She's consenting to it. It's the consent that makes it valid for her, and that you're doing it to a picture of her, and she's consenting to it. It would be perverse if she didn't consent to it. If she was made to do it against her consent, then that would be perverse. See, she did it for a reason. It was to get herself through a trying time, or it was to get some drugs that she needed in order to get through a tough time. You know. So anyhow, I need to go and play this game. Not really need to go and play this game. There are people that are playing the game right now. They're getting their ass kicked, and I want to kind of counter ass kick, so they get so they get their little victory at the beginning of the day, so they can get through the rest of the day. Because that's the way people play these video games, is they just need one little victory. There's a guy by the name of Todd Rundgren, and he had this song called "Just One Victory," and it says, "Trying for it all, praying for it all we need is one victory, and we're on our way." You know. And that's just the way people work. They need something to make them happy that'll get them through their day. For some, it's just listening to Paul Harvey on the radio at the end of the day, or maybe they hear the talk of the crew of the people in the radio shows at the beginning of the day. Maybe they listen to some favorite music. Maybe they've read a favorite Bible verse. Each person's got their own way of getting through the day, and it starts with one victory. And that's what I'm trying to provide, is that one victory. Of course, there are going to be people that are going to suffer from the terrible, I'm probably going to orbital the crap out of a whole bunch of people, but they're going to share in that that one despicable act by me, and they go, "Man, that was so awful," and then they're like all kind of getting kind of funny about it, It's like, well, I was really on an edge, and then that shit happened, That's something that's going to cause them to laugh. If you need to laugh now, if you need consolement, I would say prayer. Go for prayer. If you need to laugh, go to my website, Rock Me Amadeus. Rock, just like the song, ROCKAMADEUS, and the Deus in there means is God, I think. Deus. Amadeus was the name of Mozart, so that's where the Rock Me Amadeus came from. But Deus is God, Deus. Dios, I think is also the same, but Deus, Rock Me Amadeus, and it's separated by a dot, so it's Rock Me Amadeus. Rock, okay, RCKMEAMADE.US, and you go to that website, and it's like you will not get to the end of the number of pages that are in there. It's about 500 feeds of music videos, some with thousands of videos in them. And you're saying, how did you make this? And what I basically did is I used my programming skills to basically suck out all the good video content out of YouTube and stick them into little pools of videos that I can rearrange and shuffle, and I can make them work end to end. It's all my programming abilities. That website, and I will say this to all of the people who didn't hire me in the past, And it's probably a good reason is that God was keeping me from getting hired, because he knew that somewhere down the road I would get some money from a trust and I wouldn't have to work. But in my mind, it's kind of, the website is kind of a fuck you to all those people that wouldn't hire me, that couldn't see that I was a really valuable person, and I had the capacity to create a site like that that does that. And they may not still see the value in what I'm creating, but what I'm trying to do is bring back the thing that I find very valuable in my life, and that was that MTV occurred, and I was able to get so much enjoyment from so many bands and seeing them perform, to seeing their dreams fulfilled, and for me to have the music that they were providing, that was getting me through life, along with an addiction to porn and all of those other things that I've. And then on top of that, I got Jesus inspired, and I got biblical things, and the only way I ever got to understand any of this stuff was by going to jail ministry with my father after church. We would go to church, and when halfway through the service, after we got past singing, we would skip the sermon, which would put me to sleep. We would skip the sermon, go into the jail ministry, and watch Visual Bible. And it was the Visual Bible that informed me about stuff like Peter and like what, all this other stuff. And then when we didn't have Visual Bible, we turned to Ray Vanderlaan. And Ray Vanderlaan is really nice guy, and he gives a lot of depth. And then I might turn to somebody like Max Lucado. I got to see Max Lucado, and I'm starting to cry now, because it's something that it makes me tear up. But my brother brought us to a Christmas program, and Max Lucado sitting there talking about about Jesus's birth, and painting a picture of what people don't show you about his birth, that it wasn't a special deal. It wasn't something, it was magnificent, but it was magnificent in an environment where people don't expect to find magnificence. They were in an animal stall with animals, where there's a lot of shit and a lot of smell, an awful smell. If you've ever gone to there's a place called Palomas, Mexico. Go to it. I guarantee it is. You will be. The smell will ruin you. It's kind of like having durian. The smell will ruin you, but you might find something valuable in it that you would never find unless you got to that point. And the people in Palomas are very strong. And I would think that God's much closer to them than they are to the rest of the people in the world. And the reason why Jesus was born in such a smelly place was to show the character of God, that God is with the people that we expect God would never be with, that a God would never be with. God is more there than he is with the people that are in high places. And it was a person in high place that drove them there by ordering the killing of all children 3 and under, because this person had heard that God was coming in human form, the Christ was coming. And when he learned of that, he sought to end that entrance, because he was afraid it would do him out of a job, because he was a king, and it was King Herod. And he went and he had all children 3 and under brutally killed, because he knew that God was coming in, or that there would be a new king that was going to come from a generation that was just born. And he told these wise men that came to him about wanting to find this ruler. And he says, go and find the ruler, come back to me so that I might worship him as well. Now, there would be people that say, how can you believe such a silly story? And I'm saying, well, silly or not, it's an idea that if somebody knew, it's just like throwing your pearls before swine. If you give somebody the opportunity to ruin to ruin something God might do in the world. If you give them that opportunity, they might take it and ruin not only you at everything that could have happened that would have been good. So, and I take that risk myself by being forthcoming and telling people I fapped to porn. You know, but I'm just saying that Jesus was born in a feeding trough to animal, where the cow puts their head down and starts chewing on hay. That was where Jesus was born, was a feeding trough. And the people that were there to witness this were shepherds. And think of shepherds the way these days, and I don't want to say this in a bad way, but this is just an example because they know this is the case. If you are a truck driver in 18 and you go into a truck driver stop and they got all that stuff like chewing tobacco and stuff that truckers they chew tobacco and they spit it and all the disgusting, just to get themselves through the day. They're chewing on tobacco, they're smoking some really disgusting stuff, because that's the way the world sees it. That the shepherds that were there to witness Jesus' birth were of such. So if you can imagine a bunch of truck drivers just hanging out, witnessing the birth of Jesus inside of a feeding trough at a farm, that's essentially the image that they saw back then of Jesus' birth. That was the spectacle, was that God would come through this passageway into this world and bring something great in a world where we're knee deep in shit. That Jesus would walk through that knee deep of shit to get to the cross and take it down with him, so that the rest of us could actually have a valuable life knee deep in shit. And we're still knee deep in shit, but we're able to get through it. And I don't know if it's me or if it's something in me that's crying right now, but it is crying, whatever it is. And it's a joyful cry. It's a cry of emotion. It's a cry of satisfaction. It's somewhere in the feeling I'm getting is somewhere between my nose, between my eyes. It's somewhere kind of deep inside my head. Maybe it's maybe it has nothing to do with this. But anytime I feel deep emotion, it's like I could just almost cry if I let it happen. And I just won't let it happen. I mean, at some point today maybe I'll cry. But for me, it's a lot easier just to go and do something else. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to cut this one off.